Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Today I'm going to be talking about self-harm. I talked about this a little bit in my suicide video, the difficult conversations regarding suicide a few months ago, but today I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail. When we talk about self-harm or self-injury is the purposeful causing of harm or damage to oneself by means of like cutting or burning or banging your head or your other body parts against something to cause some level of pain or damage, as well as strangulation. The DSM-5 considers these types of injuries as non-suicidal injuries. However, there are other forms of self-harm that are not as immediately damaging or doesn't cause immediate pain, but there are still forms of self-harm. And those are things such as not taking care of your medical health. So you're having a health issue and not getting that addressed, or engaging in reckless or risk-taking behaviors such as unprotected sex or driving at very high rates of speed recklessly. Also, working or exercising to the point of collapse or causing some level of major harm to your body or your mental health. And lastly, there is making sure your basic needs are being met. So you're not getting enough food, you're not staying hydrated or getting enough water, or you're not getting enough or adequate amount of sleep. All of those are ways that we inflict self-harm on ourselves. It doesn't cause immediate damage or immediate pain, but over time they can result in like a serious injury or some level of pain or damage to oneself. Now, there are multiple reasons why people engage in self-harm or self-injurious behaviors. One reason why individuals engage in self-harm or self-injury is because they're having a hard time dealing with uncomfortable emotions. And to engage in self-harm and self-injury allows them to kind of distract from those uncomfortable feelings and emotions, and also gives them some level of relief or release. Also, people engage in self-harming behaviors or self-injurious behaviors as a way of feeling something. These are typically individuals or people who feel like emotionally numb or feel like they aren't feeling attached to their environment around them or to people around them, so they don't feel connected. So they may engage in this type of physical pain to feel something. There are also individuals who engage in self-harm or self-injury as a way of being able to understand what they're feeling in the moment. So sometimes our emotions can be so overwhelming and so complicated that we may not fully understand what's happening for us emotionally. We aren't able to label that emotion. We aren't able to call to mind like what's happening for us in the moment emotionally. So there's this idea of I inflict pain in order for me to understand and know what I'm actually dealing with and coping with. Because if I cause physical pain, let's say a cut or a burn, I know how to treat that. But I'm not really clear what's going on with these emotions. So I use this physical pain so I don't have to actually focus on those emotions. The emotions are uncomfortable, but in this scenario or in this instance, I don't really understand where the emotions are coming from. So I need something that I actually understand. And lastly, another reason we may engage in self-harm or self-injury is because there may be a history of trauma or neglect or abuse or some type of maltreatment that they're trying to kind of cope with. Self-harm or self-injury is a coping strategy. It is a maladaptive coping strategy, and it's not something that we encourage individuals to engage in as a way to cope with stressful situations or difficult life situations. However, we understand that this is something that individuals have learned to do to kind of cope with stressful situations or dealing with uncomfortable emotions. So, self-injury and self-harm is not a cry for attention. Also, it's not a non-fatal suicide attempt. It is exactly what I described it as before, which is that it's the infliction of pain as a way of coping with difficult situations or difficult emotions, simply put. However, self-harm can be a precursor to a suicide attempt, so it is something that should be taken serious. So when we engage in self-injurious or self-harmful behaviors, there are secondary emotions that we may feel after we've engaged in this behavior. And those feelings may be feelings of guilt, shame, or embarrassment about and using this as a method of coping. And those secondary emotions are understandable, and they also need to be processed are dealt with along with the initial driver or trigger that led to the self-injurious or self-harmful behaviors. So with that being said, what to do when you are engaging in self-harm or self-injurious behaviors? First thing to do is actually seek help. Seek mental or medical professional help so that you're able to learn how to cope with stressful situations, difficult life situations, and to learn new coping strategies that doesn't include harming or hurting yourself. Secondly, talk about your emotions or talk with your friends and family members about how you're feeling. Learn to communicate how you're feeling so it doesn't feel overwhelming, so you don't go to this way of coping to manage stressful situations. Caveat to that, not all of our friends or family members have the ability to kind of hold space and process and help you deal with mental health concerns on this level. So it doesn't mean that they care about you any less. It just means that this is something that's outside of their wheelhouse to kind of make space for and to actually support you in this moment. Does not mean they care about you any less. It just means that this is not something that they have the ability to support or understand. So make sure that when you're having these discussions with friends and family members, it's someone who can understand and provide you with the level of support that is needed. Also, reaching out to like national crisis lines, so like 988, and there are other crisis lines that are focused on self-harm and non-suicidal injury. And those I'll actually put on the screen at the end of the video just for additional resources as well. So be able to reach out. And with 988, the 988 crisis line, you don't always have to talk to someone. You can call, you can text, or you can chat with 988. All of those methods are available if you are in crises and just feel like you need to have someone to speak to. And lastly, try other coping strategies. Try other ways of distracting from the overwhelming and uncomfortable thoughts and emotions in that moment. Try things such as listening to music or listening to podcasts or watching videos. The caveat to that is there is music that we're listening to and programming that we watch that can kind of make us feel worse than what we're feeling in those moments, and they don't actually help us elevate our mood. Make sure that whatever you're listening to, whatever you're watching, is something that you know will elevate your mood, will help you feel a little better, and maybe get you out of the mind frame that you're in. The goal in that moment is just to give yourself a break from those overwhelming feelings and those overwhelming thoughts to be able to maybe come back to problem solve that issue if there is an issue that needs to be problem solved, or to just allow yourself to have that mental break. That's the goal for this particular coping strategy, is to just give yourself that mental break so you don't feel as overwhelmed as you're feeling in those moments. So it could be reading a book, it could be going on a walk, it could be playing with your pets. All of these are ways that we can take a moment and take a break from the things that are feeling overwhelming and distressful, so we're able to focus and refocus. Because when we get to that point that we're feeling overwhelmed and we're feeling overstressed, our mind is not in the place for us to make the best decisions. And this is why we sometimes go into coping strategies that aren't as helpful for us, like drinking or using other substances or engaging in self-harm or self-injurious behaviors. That's also a reason to seek additional support, because they can help you craft coping strategies that are personal to you, that are things that are helpful to you, not just the generic ones that you can read about online or hear about from other places. They can be crafted towards your personal life in ways that actually can help you. So I hope that you've learned something from today's discussion. I hope that you find this information helpful and useful. Please feel free to jot down any questions or concerns you have down below in the comment section. I thank you for listening, and I will be seeing you again very soon.